with the hockey mask. When we think about Jason, we think about the killer of Friday the 13th. But it wasn't always like that. You see, in the first Friday the 13th, it was Mrs. Voorhees who did the murders, avenging the death of her lost boy, of course, Jason. When Jason was small, he was hideously deformed, probably mentally retarded as well. Now, Jason didn't have a lot of friends. Well, probably no friends at all. And he was drowned. The counselors weren't paying attention. They were doing the usual sins of horror movies. Premarital sex, drugs, and alcohol. So little boy Jason died. See, his mother didn't like that. Not one little bit. So, avenging the death of her little boy, she went crazy and murdered everyone there. And every year, when somebody came back, they would die. Now this was all true until one lady came along. Of course, she stopped the killing spree of Mrs. Voorhees. But that wasn't the end of the story. You see, after Friday the 13th Part 1, Part 2 came along, where in Part 2, Jason is the killer, but he was out for the revenge of his dead mother. Jason would continue to murder, and murder for 4 sequels until one boy named Tommy Jarvis put a stop to it. He went nuts on Jason, hacking him with a machete over and over and over again. Jason had finally died. But Part 5 came along because they couldn't stop the franchise. Part 5, it wasn't the real Jason. Probably my least favorite movie of all time. It was a phony Jason. His son was murdered by one man at that lake. And it wasn't even Crystal Lake either. Just a place where Tommy was put along with a bunch of other mental students. But that's besides the point again. And he was murdered by Tommy Jarvis. He was put in this situation again. At the end, we see Tommy coming into as a murderer. But that doesn't appear in Part 6. Yes, another one. Part 6 is where Tommy Jarvis gets so caught up with the haunted memories of his past that he decides to take a shovel, gasoline, and matches so he can finally burn Jason to make sure he will never come back again. But that's not what happens. You see, he gets pissed after seeing his dead body. He runs to the graveyard fence, grabs a pole off of it, and stabs his dead body over and over again. Now, he gets out of the grave, goes to get the gasoline, and this is what happens. Lightning strikes the rod. Ironic, isn't it? Lightning giving a dead body power again. Now, that power gave Jason immortality, strength that he'd never had before. He was a zombie, out for revenge again. Now, he would continue to have this power for about 3 more sequels until his life was put to an end once again. But then after that, New Line, yes, New Line, bought the rights to Jason. Paramount was ashamed of Jason. So Jason was bought by them. And here's what happens. Jason is murdered. Not in cinema, but by New Line. New Line destroys everything anybody ever knew about Jason. When they make their first movie, I was ashamed that I even watched these movies. You see, Jason was back to normal. They didn't even think of the past movies. They were trash. Back at Crystal Lake, back from Manhattan. Terrible. In this odd movie, Jason is shot, blown to pieces by machine guns, and then a missile drops on him and destroys him. Now, for some odd reason, the doctor who's doing the autopsy report on Jason is weird. He literally eats the heart of Jason's beating heart. I don't know how that made sense. But that's besides the point. Jason was now inside this man, and the only way he could get out of the body is if he was transferred from one tool to another by mouth contact. Gross. But here comes the odd part. He has a sister. Now, if I'm wrong, correct me, but I don't remember Betsy Palmer having a sister. Betsy Palmer being Mrs. Voorhees, and she doesn't have a sister. But I don't remember her having a daughter. I remember her saying her only child. And if I'm wrong, correct me again. This movie was made in the 90s. And it's been 10 years, 10 or 20 years for Jason franchise. This girl is 20 years old, meaning she'd have to be born around the time she was murdered. Weird, yes. So big screw up their new line. And then comes Jason X. I know, horrible. The most horrible Jason movie ever. And I said part 5 was bad. At least they stuck to the story. Jason X. Jason is captured by the army. Now Jason is chained up. For a long time they've been doing research on him. But I guess for this one moment, he decides to kill everybody. He chases a doctor lady, I think, researcher, into a cryogenics lab, and she traps him in there. But she just gets stabbed in the stomach through the cryogenics, and the whole room freezes up, and they're both frozen through time. And it's been thousands of years, maybe actually hundreds. Just correct me, somebody. And then, here's what happens. Jason is brought aboard a spaceship, going to another planet, specifically Earth 2. Now, Jason does his usual murder sprees until he's blown to pieces by a robot. Yes, a robot. And then he turns into Uber Jason. Now, he turns into Uber Jason when those little ants that can cure anything, attach arms, heal wounds, get onto him. And you know how that happens? When he's blown to pieces, he lands on the bed where you have to lay when the ants come on. The ants, they cure Jason. They spread around the room and get more pieces, metal pieces, to rebuild him, make him stronger, faster. You know, that whole trip. But here comes, he's a robot now. And he's invincible. Until Mace Windu is in a spacesuit and kills him. But anyway, after that comes Freddy vs. Jason, a movie that destroyed it again. Freddy is now more perverted and funnier than he ever has been before. And then we have Jason, who's now like 10 feet tall skinnier than ever, different mask, different clothes, the original Earth, and it's all for fun. Jason gets murdered by Freddy Krueger. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. When they fight, they're out of the dream world. And I've seen teenagers kick his ass out of the dream world. And Jason gets his ass kicked by Freddy Krueger? No. Here's what I think would happen. Jason would kill